Glad you're back with us here at the Kansas Speedway, getting set for a nationwide series practice. See the cars just rolling out onto this 1.5-mile racetrack. Kyle Busch has a commanding lead, a 211-point gap between he and second place Carl Edwards. Brad Keselowski still trying to hang on to his championship hopes. Glad you're back with us. Steve Burns, Larry McReynolds, and Jeff Hammond. We've been racing here once a year since 2001. Now, Jeff Green won that first race in 2001. Denny Hamlin won in 2008. And you know what? Since then, we've never had a repeat winner.
And we've got a big field of cars here. We have 51 cars, but we've got a lot of young drivers here. We got a little bit of inexperience here. We've got 20 drivers. They've never been here in a Nationwide Series car. And when you look at all of those 51 drivers, 30 of them, they've never won a Nationwide Series race. And I think when you throw in the fact that the lack of experience at this racetrack and the weather, especially the wind with gusts up to 40 miles per hour, I think these guys, even with the more downforce in these Nationwide Series cars, they're going to have their hands full at the speed you run around this 1.5-mile racetrack.
Well, you mentioned the fact that a number of young drivers. We also got 16 guys doing double duty. So those guys have already had an opportunity to get on the racetrack, get a feel of what the wind's kind of doing to their race cars so they can kind of anticipate and be better prepared. If we take a look right here at our point leader, Kyle Busch on the racetrack, the key thing for me is the momentum now that the 99 car, after a big win at Dover coming in here, his basically home racetrack. I'm talking about Carl Edwards, who's second in points, is also former champion of the series. I think there's still a great battle between these two guys to be settled yet. Even though he's got a big lead, I think Carl is going to put all the pressure he can on this 18 car to see if he will break and make a mistake and give him an opportunity to get back in this point chase.
And we've got 7 races to go, and I know the team and the driver that has to be somewhat frustrated to some degree is that 88 car, Brad Keselowski. They've got 6 consecutive top 5 finishes, but when you've got guys like Kyle Busch that no matter when, even if they don't win, they finish in the top 5 like 4th last week at Dover, you just, no matter how good you're running, you just can't catch them.
You've got to force a mistake here right now because the lead that Kyle has got, the way this car performs, and the ability of this team as a whole, they've got to make a mistake or get caught up in somebody else's mistake for them to give a guy like Carl Edwards or even the 20 to get an opportunity to get back up in here. There's Kyle Season and Keselowski. With Kyle Season, I mean, it's just been phenomenal, as it normally is in anything he gets into, with 6 wins and 3 poles. But look at the top 5s, 20. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, out of 28 races. And then just look at the top 10s, 24. And right now he's set the mark. He's the fastest in this practice as it's just getting going, Steve.
Interesting statistic about Kyle Busch and this amazing season he's had. You saw he's led 2,053 laps. The only other driver to lead over 2,000 laps in a season in this division has been the great Sam Ard. So just another, again, you look at his numbers, like you said, Jeff, the top 5s, well, it's just remarkable what he's done in this series.
When it comes to the series, it used to be, we always talked about Harry Gant and Mark Martin, and he's just rewriting the record books when it comes to so many different statistics, and I think as long as he stays healthy and his career, you know, keeps going like it's going right now, there's no reason to believe that he won't pretty much put his name in every chapter there is as far as the record books are concerned. And here's another young guy that every time he shows up in this 20 car, you got to consider Joey Logano a threat to possibly upset his teammate, and that is Kyle Busch.
You know, one other number about Kyle Busch, the thing that's most remarkable to me, we talked about top 5s. He had 10 consecutive finishes of first or second in the middle of the season.
Right now, Joey Logano, we're looking at him in his 20 car. He's second quickest behind his teammate Kyle Busch. So the 2 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyotas up there 1-2 so far.
Our statistician Jimmy Hicks just handed a note, 15 top 2 finishes for Kyle Busch.
And we know how much he really wants to win this championship. He already announced several weeks ago that he would pull back and run a limited Nationwide Series schedule in 2010.
John West Townley's in the 09 car. Boy, what a learning curve it's been for John West this season.
But he was pretty solid at Dover last week. He ended up qualifying 8th. That was a career best for John West Townley. And just ran all day and was solid. Ended up with a top 20 finish when it was all said and done. And he has some ARCA experience here. He finished 15th here a year ago in the ARCA race.
Well, currently he's 12th quickest in this early part of this practice.
Speaking of ARCA, they raced here yesterday. In fact, 18-year-old Parker Kligerman, a Penske development driver, got the win, and he's hoping to make his nationwide debut here.
How many wins is that for him? 8?
8.
8 wins in the ARCA Series, and they've got one more race to go. Actually, I think this coming weekend down at Rockingham.
Yeah, Justin Lofton, who's actually leading the points, has 6 wins. Kligerman with 8.
She'll be a barn burner at the Rock next weekend.
No surprise here. Kyle Busch is the quickest early in this practice. Stay with us. Good news and bad news for Clint Bowyer, the Kansas native. He was 3rd quickest, but just as we went to commercial, he lost that number 29 car all by himself. Let's take a look.
That's over in turn 2, and he was actually making a long run. He's run more laps than anybody. He had just completed 8 laps, and they won't even have to question it, straight to a backup.
Let's listen now on board with Clint Bowyer.
That's all she wrote for the in-car.
That is what you call the deadly silence of a car out of control.
Clint, the winner at Dover last week in the Nationwide Series. 2 wins in 2009.
Larry, now they roll out the backup car. A lot of damage to the back of that Holiday Inn Chevrolet for Clint Bowyer. As we said, he was 3rd overall. He had done that on his 6th lap.
And guys, I think we're going to see more of that before this practice is over with. And you can say the good thing about these Nationwide cars is, yes, they make more downforce, but when they get a little bit sideways, they get real sideways. I mean, they're not like the Cup cars where I think that the big wing and the way that car is designed, it's got a little bit of side force that sometimes you can get out of shape and catch it back. These cars, when they break traction, they're gone.
Wendy Venturini.
And right now in the 18 and 20 garage stalls, they're both in here. They've made some quick runs out there. The 18 of Kyle Busch is the fastest right now, and his teammate Joey Logano is right behind him in 2nd. Kyle Busch said he lands that right front tire, tends to slide out from underneath him, so he did want to make some changes to this race car before he got back out there once we get under these green conditions and the track gets cleaned up for Clint Bowyer's wreck. Now right next to him, Joey Logano said he's a little bit free. He's not tight anywhere, but the more wheel he tends to give it, it tends to break loose on Joey Logano. They also, for driver comfort purposes, will move that steering wheel in the 20 car. Steve?
All right, thank you, Wendy. So the caution came out at about the 5-minute 40-second mark.
You know, one thing I want to point out, we just saw that shot of Kyle Busch, who's the points leader, the 2nd car in the garage area, and his teammate Joey Logano in the 20 car, the 1st car in the garage area. You park in the garage area by how you are in owner points, but the 20 car was the owner points champion in 2008. They've had that #1 garage stall all year long, and then of course the 18 car is leading the points in 2009, so that's the reason they're in the 2nd spot.
Want to mention the schedule here for the Nationwide Series teams. This is a 90-minute practice. They have a 1-hour practice at 6 Eastern, and then they qualify tomorrow morning. We'll have that for you here on Speed. Qualifying tomorrow is 9 local, 10 Eastern. Let's go back to Bob Dillner.
Well, Steve, when Clint Bowyer climbed out of his wreck machine, you could just see the grimace on his face. He was very upset because he told the crew he had a very good race car. You could see the backup being unloaded behind me right now. And I asked the guys, what did he say about what happened? And basically, he came on the radio and said, I don't know what happened. The car just came out from underneath me. So Clint Bowyer just went up inside to talk to Doug Randolph and the guys, and hopefully we'll get a word with him in just a second. But a big surprise for Clint Bowyer going around and hitting the wall with that car.
Well, the silver lining to the cloud is it's happened roughly less than 10 minutes into this first practice. As you mentioned, Steve, this is an hour-and-a-half practice. It'll have downtime during Sprint Cup Series qualifying, and then practice later on. They should have plenty of time to get that backup car out on the racetrack. Not that that's a consolation to tearing a car up, but they should get plenty of practice.
And you were the one talking about all the young drivers. You forgot about the veterans.
That's an experienced driver there.
Yep.
Join us for Trackside at 7 Eastern tonight. We've got a great show. Really excited to host Mark Martin and Jimmy Johnson for our Friday night party/TV show, 7 Eastern here on Speed.
The 1-2 finishers from Dover last.
Sir.
You know what? With a group like that, you don't even really need me and Larry and Elliott, do you? You can
What?
handle it without us, can't you?
Just frail away.
Oh, you guys have to be there.
We will be there, but I'm going to tell you, that's a big show.
It is. That is big. See a pink car for Carl Edwards. It is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So Carl's sporting pink colors on that Save-A-Lot Ford.
Pretty much what you might call a home track for Carl. Not too far up the road to his hometown up in Missouri. Actually, his sponsor, Save-A-Lot, they have pledged $100,000 to aid in this is month of the fight against breast cancer awareness month. So a big deal for this sponsor, and the paint scheme, I think, somewhat backs it up.
Carl won here in 2004 in a Camping World truck. And let's go back to Wendy.
Well, this report is just for Larry Mack, and it's a weather report. The track temperature at the beginning of this nationwide practice was 92 degrees, and now it's dropped down to 79. You could feel it in the air. It's gotten much cooler. The sun has gone away, and of course the wind picked up yet again, but that track temperature difference could play some factors into these race cars. We just got our practice session started, and these guys really have to adjust to the weather now.
Well, I think the biggest thing they're fighting is just what the Sprint Cup Series cars fought for their hour-and-a-half practice, and they're also going to fight it during that qualifying session. Is what you see these flags going through right now is the wind. Yeah, the track cooling down is going to affect the handling, but the wind is what they're playing havoc with right now, I think.
Saw Kansas City Chiefs flag. We are 24 miles from Arrowhead Stadium, and the Chiefs host the New York Giants this weekend. Our friend from NASCAR on Fox, Barry Landis, is in town to produce the game.
I also saw a boogity
flag. Yep. You think DW will text you again, Jeff, about the flag? He wants another view of that.
I will say he'll want a view where
will.
you don't have to read it backwards.
And hey guys, the flags inside in the infield area, there's one flags on the other side of the racetrack in the Cup garage are going a different direction than they are in the Nationwide garage, and the spotters have all commented on that.
Well, the thing is, Wendy, all I can tell you, you go ask Clint Bowyer right now what happened to that 29 car, and I guarantee he'll probably lay it out there on the wind, because you can hear he just rolled off in the corner. He didn't even try to pick up the throttle when that car came around. And again, you got to believe if there's going to be little gremlins in the race car right now, it could wind up being the wind.
Let's take another ride with Clint Bowyer, and let's just listen.
He had not went back to the throttle. That thing started getting loose with him down there in the middle of the corner when he was off the throttle, and he pretty much knew, I think it was downhill from there.
And I think it kind of, like I say, it had to have caught him by total surprise, because he never even, I think had a chance really to think about getting back to the throttle to try to save that car.
That was his Sprint Cup Series teammate Kevin Harvick in the 33 car, headed out on the racetrack. Sat on the pole here a year ago in 2008 and a win here in the Nationwide Series in 2006.
So about an 11-minute break in the action here, and let's go back to Bob quickly.
Clint Bowyer, unfortunate incident. What happened out there?
Man, he's a little bit free, and his car came in good, and that's why I stayed out there. I just got in a corner and it turned around on me. I mean, it snapped as fast as, I just couldn't catch it. I tried to catch it once and it went on around, but just unfortunate. That's the car we won with last week, and the guys put a lot of hard work into that. That was our best piece. That's why we brought it to Kansas, and I feel bad for these guys. I feel sick about it.
Is it the wind deal out here, you think?
No, I don't know. It's just something just turned it around just like that. And I mean, the wind's changing directions and it's gusting, but hell, if anybody ought to be used to that, it ought to be me.
All right, Clint Bowyer, at least he's got a smile, and he's going to be getting in that backup car, guys.
I guess he's trying to say, I am a homeboy, and I do know what the winds do here in Kansas every now and then.
Of course, Clint grew up in Emporia, Kansas.
See Brian Vickers here in the 32 car. He's had 13 starts in 2009 with 9 top 10s. The last time we saw Brian in the Nationwide Series, he finished 15th at Atlanta back on Labor Day weekend.
You know, guys, I'm curious. I know the cars are a lot different in terms of horsepower and what have you. from the Nationwide side to the Sprint Cup side, but I'm wondering if this effort might help Brian advance in the chase on Sunday.
They are running the same tire that they're running in the Sprint Cup. We certainly, as you mentioned, Steve, the cars are substantially different, but I don't know that repetitions, especially with the tire combination and all, probably the only time it's not good is what's going on right now, because they're going to jump, the 16 guys trying to do double duty is going to jump right out of this car and have to go qualify that Sprint Cup Series car. That could be the only downside to it.
And that's one thing I would have to agree with Larry on, is that I think when you've got an opportunity to kind of get yourself reacclimated and not have to go out and lay down a really fast lap like they'll have to do here a little bit later on this afternoon in the Sprint Cup practice, qualifying that is. And the funny thing about Brian right there, if you take a quick look, he turned into the Cup garage. He was so used to turning in the Cup garage, he had to back up. He's now got to go down to the lower garage, which is where the Nationwide cars are at. He's just so used to doing that early on today. But I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. But no, I think that any time that you can get out and maybe learn a little bit, about the tires, about the track, how much grip it's going to put down, how it's kind of like taking rubber, all those things are good information to take back to your crew chief and your car chief. And we take a look at Justin Allgaier, 15th quickest right now in this practice, and at number 12.
Kyle Busch is the quickest as we look at Brad Keselowski, and as Larry has said, he's had a tremendous season in his own right. If it weren't for Kyle Busch in those, 20 top 5 finishes.
And you know, we've not been doing a lot of Nationwide Series practice and qualifying sessions during the month of September. But his crew chief, Tony Uri Sr., a little over a month ago was involved in a pretty serious automobile accident, and Tony was actually back at the track for the first time last weekend at Dover. Looked like he was feeling good, said he was a little bit sore, but I'm sure he's glad to have the man we call Pops back at the racetrack with him. Brad's doing double duty. We saw him in the 25 Sprint Cup Series car earlier in practice.
That's David Gilliland in the one car owned by James Finch. Right now, 14th overall, 5 laps on this 1.5 mile Kansas Speedway as we go on board.
I saw him kind of the back end kind of kick out a little bit off of turn 4 in that one car. Let's kind of ride along here with David as he goes off into turn 1, gets out of the throttle, lets the car roll down to the bottom of the racetrack. Now eases back into that throttle, trying to keep it down on the bottom, having to kind of play with it coming up off of turn 2 down the back straightaway. And Larry, you talked about the difference between Kansas City and Chicago, pretty straight down this back straightaway.
But I'm telling you, you're not out of the throttle much. You just roll out of it enough just to get the car turned down to the bottom well before the apex of the corner. You're back in the throttle. But I think this gives a great view that there's just not much banking at this racetrack. 15 degrees for a 1.5 mile racetrack is not much at all.
It looks flat to me from here.
Yeah, David is not in the 71 Sprint Cup Series car this weekend. Bobby Labonte is in it, as he has been on a couple of other occasions. But David is actually in a second car for Robbie Gordon Motorsports. He'll be trying to qualify later on this afternoon.
Driving the 04 car for Robbie Gordon.
And this seems to be what James Finch, Mark Reno's doing with this one car ever since they released Mike Bliss back in early August, is they continue to put different Sprint Cup Series drivers. The team runs the full schedule. Mark Truex Jr. was in it at Dover. Ryan Newman has driven it, so that seems to be the strategy for the rest of 2009.
And Larry, don't you believe that right now that James Finch and his entire Mississippi operation, they're supposedly going to go full-time Cup racing next year. And David Gilliland, maybe this is kind of like a driver audition for him, because I mean, he's done a whale of a job driving that 71 car this year.
But David's also going to drive for Joe Gibbs Racing 3 races, Lowe's Motor Speedway, Homestead, can't remember the other one, but he's going to get 3 turns at Joe Gibbs Racing.
Yeah, and I know he's pretty excited about that, in a 4th car.
Yep. Kyle Busch is the fastest, followed by Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, Kevin Harvick, and the Biff, Greg Biffles. Take a look at Scott Speed in the 99. He's 17th overall.
You know, when he drives this 99 car, he's actually pretty solid. He has 10 starts in 2009. You go back to Dover last week, he finished 8th. Even though it's a limited schedule, that was his 5th consecutive top 10 finish, only 2 finishes outside the top 13.
24 minutes into this practice, Kyle Busch checking timing and scoring and fixes his hair. And back at the Kansas Speedway, On board with Brendan Gaughan, driving for Rusty Wallace. He slows down, heads to the garage area.
He's 27th quickest right now.
There's that pink race car for Carl Edwards, helping raise awareness for breast cancer, the fight against breast cancer.
And you know, when you think about Carl Edwards, he is, year in and year out, he's so solid in this Nationwide Series car. He had a championship season last year, came up a little short to Clint Bowyer, and the same thing seems to be happening to him this year with 7 races to go.
But the thing is right now, though, he's gained on Kyle Busch. He just needs to gain a lot more. I mean, if you take a look at what he's going to need, he's going to need to gain about 31 points over the remaining 7 races over Kyle Busch to have a chance to run him down.
Yeah, and finishing 1 or 2 positions in front of him a race is not going to get.
No, that's what I told you earlier, is that they've got to put enough pressure on that 18 car to make a mistake, or they've got to hope that something like that happens, because, again, the consistency on that 18 car and what they've been doing over there at Joe Gibbs Racing, they will not beat him this year. It will wind up being Kyle's championship. At least, in my opinion, Kyle's championship to lose.
And by the way, during the commercial break, you have confirmation Darrell Waltrip saw the boogity flag.
Yes, I do.
I think we have confirmation that Van Colley saw the boogity flag.
Now, wait a minute. Is DW twittering, or was that just a text message?
That would be technically called a text message.
Okay.
You know, from one Sprint phone to another Sprint phone.
Kyle Busch talking about his race car, as all race car drivers do, with his hands as much as his mouth.
You know, that's one thing I do love about that guy, along with Brad Keselowski. They have the ability, and they've worked on these cars in all forms. They do understand the mechanical part of it. You sit there and watch Brad, he's describing what the car is doing. 2 pops right there, Tony Erie Sr. right there, the gentleman right there with the beard. That's the one you were talking about. Larry just came back and kind of moving a little bit slow from an automobile accident.
Patrick Sheltra in the 81 car, full-time competitor in the ARCA Series, making one of his few starts in the Nationwide Series. Made his first start at Homestead the end of last year.
Get a lot of press releases on this race, too.
Yes, we do. We are not short on information on Patrick Sheltra. But one thing that I didn't realize until I was in the garage this morning, longtime competitor in the Sprint Cup Series, Nationwide Series, and NASCAR Camping World Truck Series, working with Patrick as far as a driver, coach, and a spotter. Ted Musgrave saw him in the garage area this morning.
Ted's a good man to have on board then.
Patrick ran in the ARCA race yesterday, ended up, I think, spinning out late in the race, ended up finishing 11th.
Brian Scott aboard the 11 car this week. He is 18th overall.
Boy, this team had a great run last week at Dover with Mike Bliss behind the wheel of the car. Ended up finishing 2nd up there at the Monster Mile. Scott Legacy drove for this team most of the year. Scott was released about a month or so ago, and a lot like James Finch, they've been putting a lot of Sprint Cup Series drivers in this car, including Denny Hamlin has driven it 2 or 3 times. We've had 47 of our 51 cars that's practiced. As far as the go-or-go-homers, Terry Cook in the 91 car is the quickest. He's 13th quickest.
And Andy Ponstein is the slowest.
And that's Scott Wimmer in the 5 car this week for JR Motorsports. And then Reed Sorensen, who also ran this 10 car at Dover, he's in the 10 car again this weekend.
And this is Wimmer's last ride in that 5 car. Bob Dillner.
Well, Steve Burns, Scott Wimmer is having some trouble with that car, actually, because it feels like the rear end is just skating over the racetrack. So they made some significant changes, actually. A right rear spring that was about 100 pounds softer, and a left rear spring that was about 25 pounds softer. So this is the run that's going to tell Scott Wimmer if he's got it a little bit closer, because right now he's been skating all over that racetrack up until now.
Well, based on what they're fighting, and then you go back to Clint Bowyer's interview and you saw what happened to him, it sounds like, at least for today right now, these cars are fighting a little on the loose side.
And we'll go back and need to touch on it. I think myself that this racetrack has given up quite a bit of grip since we raced here a year ago.
It seems to do it year in and year out.
Just because of the weather, there's nothing you can do about it unless you want to repave it every year, but I think it's given up some grip.
Eric Darnell in the 6 car. This will be his 3rd start in as far as the Sprint Cup Series, but this will be the first weekend that he's having to go back and forth and do the double duty between the 96 car in the Cup garage and the 6 car in the Nationwide Series garage.
Darnell, 12th overall, in that Northern Tools Ford. Kyle Busch, 6 laps on the track, and his first lap was the fastest. Stay with us here on Speed. We're in Kansas. Classic cars on the racetrack right now. The 24 car being driven by Eric McClure. 48 of our 51 drivers have been on track. About 34 minutes into a 90-minute practice. They have 2 practices today. They will qualify tomorrow morning here on Speed.
You know, something I didn't realize until I was in the garage area this morning, that Ernie Elliott and his engine company, they're actually back to building some Ford engines. They build the engines for that 24 car as well as the Ford of Jason Keller, the 2017. Of course, back in the 80s, if you thought about Ford horsepower and Ford engines, you absolutely thought about Ernie Elliott.
Parker Kligerman got the win in the ARCA REMAX Series here yesterday. He's hoping to make his nationwide debut here this weekend. Just 18 years old. He is 19th right now. This kid's from Connecticut. Told me a story that his family didn't really want him. They discouraged him from racing. His dad said, "I'll support you for 1 year." And I tell you what, he is on his way now. 8 wins in the ARCA Series this year.
I got to share my story about him.
About the school bus?
I think
it's a
you
great
shared
one.
it.
You got to tell
it. You know, he was running ARCA, of course, back in the spring, and his crew chief, Chris Carrier, called him one morning to talk to him. And Parker was whispering. And Chris said, "Why are you whispering?" He said, "I'm on the school bus. I'm not supposed to be on my phone on the school bus."
He left the ARCA race in Pocono back in June, drove straight home to Connecticut, and went to his senior prom. Now, I think that puts things in perspective, a school bus and a senior prom.
To me, it sounds like that same thing we heard early on about Brian Vickers when he first was coming around and driving in the Nationwide Series, what he was doing at his young age. So maybe he'll wind up being as successful as Brian Vickers has turned into. We take a look at Jason Leffler, who currently right now is 10th quickest in the 38 Great Clips car.
And you know, we've been coming here since 2001 with the Nationwide and the Sprint Cup Series cars, and the very first time here for the Sprint Cup Series race, Jason Leffler sat on the pole driving for Chip Ganassi, the 01 car.
Jimmy Hicks just told me Parker Kligerman is 19 now, so
a young 19.
He's enrolled at UNCC, the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, so still going to school part-time and racing. Bob Dillner has an update on that 38 of Jason Leffler.
Well, Steve, a lot of guys in this garage area saying it's really hard to get a hold of this racetrack during this practice session because the sun keeps on poking out and going back in, then you have the wind to deal with. Well, this guy, Jason Leffler, is having all sorts of problems from tight in the middle to completely loose off. He believes he's got a lot of wheel in it, and then when it finally bites, it gets just, you can see it right there, guys, just kind of bobble up off the corner, and that's what they are dealing with. Jason Leffler not happy with this race car at all.
Yeah, you got to fix the first thing first, and that's obviously the not turning in the middle of the corner.
Yeah, and if they don't address that pretty quickly, they need to walk down there and take a look at the 29 car, and that's what the end results could wind up being. We take a look at Scott Zipadelli, brother to Greg Zipadelli of the 20 car Joe Logano in the Sprint Cup Series. He's a crew chief for Jason Leffler, and I'm sure he'll go down there and go to work on that.
Tony Raines, veteran driver in the 34 car.
And Tony will not be doing double duty here this weekend because actually Kevin Hamlin is in the Sprint Cup Series car that normally Tony's been driving. Tony right now is 37th quickest. He's only run a total of 7 laps. We still have 3 cars that's not practiced in this hour-and-a-half practice session. We're about a little past a third of the way through it.
Guys, I want to go back real quick and talk about this racetrack as we take a look at Stephen Wallace in the 66 car as he goes around here at Kansas. And let's talk about, you know, in the Sprint Cup deal, we were talking about Chicago compared to Kansas. To me, the track that's more similar, and I think it really is very much applies to the Nationwide Series, is Kentucky, because they race in Kentucky. They did it earlier this year when Joe Logano was the one that being the winner. But at that particular racetrack, very similar banking. I mean, both these tracks were constructed about the same time. Here 15 degrees, at Kentucky 14 degrees, front straightaway here 10, and in Kentucky 8 degrees. But the radius of the corners is quite a bit different. Big sweeping corners at Kentucky, while they're a lot tighter here. Actually, the straightaways here at Kansas are a lot longer. So you may have a similar setup that worked at a place like Kentucky, but you would even have to modify it a little bit here to be successful.
And I think that relates to what a lot of the Cup drivers said relating to the Chicagoland Speedway. Is an aerial view. It looks fairly similar with the exception of the way the backstretch is configured, but the corners here, especially the exits,
hang on to her, Steven.
Much tighter.
Sorry about that, Larry. He got a big bobble right there in the middle of the corner.
Right now he's 11th quickest. He's run a total of 12 laps.
And the reason we're bringing that up, Steve, is that some of these guys probably came with a Kentucky style setup, but right in the middle of the corner, they're so much tighter, but you're trying to turn that car to make it go. And you can see where, again, the car is bobbling right in the center of the corner, right where you need it for it to be cutting and not really comfortable. That really upsets your lap.
And I think there's some bumps down there, and when your car's a little loose or a little tight, you hit those bumps, it just makes it looser or tighter.
Hang on.
And you see the black seams. There's all sorts of issues to deal with. Purchase your Speed Insider ticket package now for the 2010 Rolex 24 at Daytona. Each specially priced 2-day ticket package comes with special pit road seating, garage access and tours, and much more. For more information, visit speedtv.com, keyword promo. Nationwide Series practice continuing here at the Kansas Speedway. Back to the garage and Wendy.
Right now, it's too loose for Kevin Harvick in the 33 car. Kevin Harvick says it's a little too loose into 1 and off of 2. That's the biggest complaint right now from Kevin Harvick. Now, also in this end of the garage area, Joey Logano has been working on trying to get his car adjusted to the way he wants it. He was a little bit free. Well, they went a little bit too far on the changes by crew chief Dave Rogers. They've gone back because now it's a little bit tight in the center, a little bit tight on exit, but it did help on the entry of Joey Logano's car. And for more on the other side in the Nationwide Garage, let's head over to Bob Dillner.
Well, Greg Biffle actually very good on the racetrack right now. You can see the number 26 car on the racetrack, but Biffle is 5th quick. There he is coming down pit road right now. And they're really just tweaking on that car right now with very minimal adjustments. A little spring here, a little track bar there. Loves that race car, but the big problem for the Biff right now is they have a vibration in the drivetrain. They don't know whether it's a gear, a drive shaft, or what. So the crew tells me that during this break between practices, they're actually going to change a bunch on this race car to try to get that vibration worked out of the car.
Yeah, I mean, because that next practice will be their final practice, so that's the last shot you're going to get. And is when you look at the records, even though he's not been to victory lane, he has the most consistent finishes here, talking about Greg Biffle. 5 top 5 finishes and 7 top 10s.
We saw the 26 briefly, that car being driven by Kevin Conway. There's the 27, veteran Jason Keller, the all-time leader in terms of series starts.
Kind of quietly sitting 7th in the Nationwide Series points with 7 races to go.
And Larry, what are you hearing down in the garage? What do you think he's going to do next year? Because he's announced the fact that he's a free agent and he would like to, go somewhere else and drive. And again, I think he'd be a great find for especially a young upstart team.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about silly season in the Cup garage. It's running rampant in the Nationwide Series garage. I think as far as sponsors, as far as drivers, teams, team members, it's moving all over the place as we spin toward 2010.
Jason Keller going underneath the 0 car of Jeremy Clements.
Kyle Busch still with the quickest time. It's Jason Keller, drops to the inside.
I talked to a few of the engine guys in the garage area, and they were a little concerned from a standpoint that NASCAR put a little higher gear in these guys versus the gear they ran last year. They put a 370, that's the lowest you can run, and last year was a 375, and they said actually with the 375 we still were not into the peak power that these engines make as far as RPM, so they felt like they were going to be even well under it, even more so when I look at the lap times. We know they'll get quicker tomorrow in qualifying, but right now Kyle Busch is the quickest at a 32.06. The track record, Martin Truex Jr. set it at a 30.17 back in 2005.
So what was the concern?
that the RPM is going to be too low. It's not, they're not going to be turning enough RPM. And you're just not really concerned as far as durability, but you're just not going to be able to get to the max power that you can make even with these tapered spacers.
Guys are sitting there watching Eric Darnell, that 6 car. You know, they made some adjustments to his vehicle. He's still 13th in his practice. But the one thing I wanted to point out is that Eric does have a win here. He won in the Camping World Truck Series back in '07. So this is a racetrack that he is familiar with and has had some success.
We're at the halfway point of this practice. Jennifer Jo Cobb is the 49th driver to be on this racetrack, also the slowest. She has just 3 laps on this track in this session. 23 car being wheeled by Robert Richardson Jr.
See him waving out there. Looks like he's getting ready to try to stay to the low side and become the pit road.
41st overall, quickest lap for Richardson. He has 21 laps in this practice.
So he's run about as many laps as anybody has run so far. But he is locked in the show in the top 30 in owner points.
That really helps to kind of like broaden your game plan when you come to a racetrack. You know, for a young driver like Robert Richardson, he can go out, he can run a lot of laps and not have to worry about nailing that qualifying laps. I mean, it's kind of like working it backwards. If you have a good finish in a race and can keep yourself up in the points, then you don't have to have a fantastic qualifying effort.
Well, talking to Ted Musgrave this morning about Patrick Shelter, what he encouraged them to do is let's go and get involved with a team that's in the top 30 in owner points. So what they did, they went to Randy McDonald, the 81 team. That way Patrick comes in here and he doesn't have to worry about that qualifying lap. He can spend these 2 practice sessions simply getting laps in the Nationwide Series cars and getting ready to race.
Versus, we've talked about young Parker Kligerman. He is not locked into the show. He's got good equipment with Penske, but he is not locked in.
He's going to have to run. He's going to have to run a good lap if he wants to race on Saturday.
Hey, stay with us here on Speed for more Nationwide Series practice. Talked about how many young drivers are here in trying to make this field. 18 of the 51 drivers under the age of 25, and 5 of the top 10 drivers in points under the age of 25.
Well, I got one even goes beyond that. Morgan Shepherd right now in the 89 car, he's 28th quickest. He's 67 years old. 20 drivers here were born well after Morgan made his first Nationwide Series start. That's almost half the 51 drivers that are entered into this race.
So what are you trying to say, that he has longevity, or that he...
All I know is when I'm 67 years old, I hope I just have half the energy that Morgan Shepherd has.
So does that mean you hope you'll be roller skating and doing those kind of things?
I don't know about the roller skating. I just hope I've got that much energy.
Bob Dillner's got plenty of pep.
Well, I'll tell you what, another guy that's got plenty of pep is Scott Speed. If you watch him around the garage area, he's always on the go, and he's on the go in this Nationwide Series in the 99 here this weekend. 12th quick on the board, but honestly, listening to the team and Scott speak, they really feel they have the second best car out there right now on the long haul. Not on the quick 1 or 2 lap run, but as they're going 5, 6 laps into the run, they feel their car is very consistent. So Scott says it's a little bit tight in the center still. Like to get that worked out, but they are trying some new front shocks on this next run, Wendy.
Well, the 88 car of Brad Keselowski, he's taking a little bit of a lunch break. I told him I wouldn't talk to him until he finished what was in his mouth with a little snack. Brad, you guys are, looks like, chilling out this practice session. You've been out of the race car. Nobody's working on your race car. What is going on? Are you just that good?
It's awesome. I don't think I've ever had a race car this good, so I'm really pleasantly surprised. We've kind of struggled at Chicago, which is a similar track to this, and you know, we got back to work, and then we had a strong run at Michigan. This is the same car from both those races, and we're fortunate enough to win. But we still weren't happy with it. We took it to Atlanta, and we weren't quite as good as Kevin Harvick was, and we did some work, and I think this car is just scary fast. So I'm really proud of everybody on Junior Motorsports team, and happy to have a fast Delphi Chevrolet.
So what does a driver snack on and drink in between during his practice sessions?
Well, since it's fall, I'm having some apple cider. It is apple cider. I know the color might look like something else. That I got from my mom, because in Michigan, you know, apples are big, apple cider, and this is that kind of year. And I had a donut, to be honest, it's a donut that had sugar on it, which is good because I need a little bit of instant energy to get through the day.
All right, thanks to Brad Keselowski for being brutally honest with us on speed. You gotta love the fall weather, Steve. Apple cider, homemade by his mom. Perfect.
Apple cider or apple jack?
In a donut.
And a donut. But,
I don't know about that combination.
the thing about Brad Keselowski, he was 10th quickest in the Sprint Cup car, so he must kind of like this racetrack. And I also want to go back to Scott Speed, and Bob Dillner was talking about. Don't forget, Scott Speed won an ARCA race here in 2008, so he knows and he likes this racetrack also.
On board with Kevin Harvick, he is 4th quick right now in his Chevrolet.
He's run a total of 18 laps.
34 times a winner in NASCAR Nationwide Series competition. 2 wins this year.
Kevin right against that white line. In fact, I think he had his left side tires almost below at that time through 1 and 2.
Harvick won at Atlanta and Bristol this year.
Remember, he settled a pole here in 2008.
Now through 3 and 4, contrary to 1 and 2, he was up about halfway up the racetrack. There's no question as we get more and more practice, more and more laps on this mile-and-a-half racetrack, in both series, we'll see the groove start to move up.
Harvick won here in Nationwide Series competition back in 2006. We look at Michael Annett.
Michael comes in here 11th in the Nationwide Series points, trying his best to get to the top 10. Right now, he's 22nd quickest. He's run a total of 23 laps.
Stay with us here at the Kansas Speedway on Speed. We'll continue our coverage of this practice. About 35 minutes left. Glad you're with us. Some exciting stuff coming up here on Speed. Monday, October 12th, it's the premiere of NASCAR Race Hub, a show that's going to air for a half an hour Monday through Thursday. And then on Wednesday, a lot of information, a lot of excitement about the NASCAR Hall of Fame. You see at 4, they'll make the announcement, the 5 inaugural inductees into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Let's go down to the garage and Bob Dillner.
Well, Steve, we were watching Jason Leffler on the racetrack a little while ago, and I think Jeff Hammond would call what you did a dee-die-do, because it looked like you went all over the place on the corner. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, it's just, well, with the wind, it's a handful, and then our car's not handling the way it should. So Scott and the guys are getting it tuned up. We just came in, we're going to put it on scales and really look it over and try something big here. And we showed up a little differently than we usually run, so we'll get the Great Clips Camry hooked up here.
For us, it looks scary. How is it behind the wheel?
Yeah, it's pretty wild out there, but it's kind of fun at the same time. I mean, sideways isn't bad as long as you're fast, but when you're slow and sideways, it's no fun.
Sounds like a former dirt racer, doesn't it?
But Steve, the good thing about that with Jason Leffler, this season has been pretty phenomenal for him also. He has had 18 top 10 finishes in 09. I mean, that's the most in his career. And we talk about, having championship type runs. He's 4th in the points right now, but, when you got guys like Carl Edwards and Kyle Busch right now kind of setting the pace in this series, Jason Leffler's, I think, accomplishment been a little bit overshadowed.
Indeed, that's a look at the 49 car being wheeled by Mark Green. You saw the 40 moments ago. Mike Bliss driving that car this week.
And the thing about Mike Bliss is he continues to find a ride for each and every race after losing the ride in the one car, as we were speaking about a little while ago. Finished 2nd at Dover. We talked about that, but he comes in here, Mike does, 8th in the Nationwide Series points. Of course, his personal goal is to do everything he can to try to finish in the top 10 in Nationwide Series points.
That's a little bit of coin to go in the driver's pocket, too.
And it looks like he's going to do it driving several race cars.
He's doing it the hard way.
I just counted 5.
And the season still got a ways to go.
He drove the one car for 21 races, then the 90 at Watkins Glen, the 87 of Joe Nemechek. He was in that car for 4 weeks. Drove the 40 car at Richmond and the 11 last week.
And he won a race in that one car back at Lowe's in May.
The 49er, that'd make it 6 cars, wouldn't it?
That's Mark Green.
Mark Green
okay,
right there. Yeah, actually, Mike is in the 40 car this week. But Mark is sitting there 26 quickest right now.
Here's another Johnson on the racetrack.
Jarrett Johnson.
That's it. Jimmy's little brother, Jarrett.
Right now, he's 40th quickest. He's run a total of 16 laps in this 07 car.
And the bad thing about Jared, though, is he comes in here, he's going to have to qualify this car.
Yep.
He's another one just like the Klingerman kid. He's going to have to get up on that wheel and make it happen.
But right now, Parker Klingerman, at least based on practice, should be in good shape, even though he's 21st quickest in that 22 car. He's the 3rd quickest of the Go-Homers.
Well, the good thing about Jared, he had a pretty good run at Dover last week. Finished 33rd.
Practice is approaching about the 2/3 mark, an hour in the books with 30 minutes to go, and then another hour a little bit later on this evening for him.
Well, from Jarrett Johnson to Jimmy Johnson. Trackside Live tonight at 7. Jimmy Johnson and Mark Martin. How about that? 1-2 in the points on Trackside Live.
1-2 at Dover.
Love that. Back at the Kansas Speedway, we just passed the 1 hour mark. Less than 30 minutes remain in this NASCAR Nationwide Series practice. The first of 2 for them here this afternoon. They will qualify tomorrow. Let's go to the garage. Wendy has an update on Carl Edwards.
Well, it's very quiet on this end of the garage area because Carl Edwards, much like Brad Keselowski, has decided to sit out a majority of this practice session. Carl went out there and ran 9 laps earlier in this practice, currently 8th on the chart. He's climbed out of the car, has gone to the hauler. The crew's working on the car, has switched over on the trim of that race car, and he will go back out there at the very end, much like Brad Keselowski, who is just now strapping into his race car to make one more run in this practice. But a very long session for the Nationwide Garage area, and these guys that feel confident about their race cars, know they have some speed under them, have sat out a majority of it.
Well, Wendy, sorry guys, I apologize about that. Wendy, I was going to say that Clint Bowyer just hopped in behind the wheel of the backup car. He crashed 52 minutes ago, and this team has been working very, very diligently on getting this car prepared. It had a lot of work to be done coming off of that hauler, so they have gone through this car, dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and he's going to be getting back on the racetrack here with just about a half an hour to go in practice, Steve.
And Bob, I'm sorry about interrupting you right there, but what I was going to say is that just remember that the East Series right here, the Nationwide Series, they are limited to the number of tires they can use in a practice session. So these long practices, I mean, they got an hour and a half now and an hour later on this afternoon. They've got to be careful how they use their tires up, because again, I think new tires are a premium. And the way the track conditions are, you want to make sure that you've got a little bit something later on, when I think the track's going to be a little bit more conducive to what we're going to see tomorrow morning. I think the track will be fast in the morning. It'll have a little bit more grip, a lot like what it'll have this afternoon. So I think a lot of the teams are kind of leaning toward that later practice to try to figure out exactly what they've got.
Yeah, I mean, they give them so many sets of tires for the whole weekend. You use them your discretion.
Right.
You want to burn them all up in practice, that's the same tires you're going to have to run in that race tomorrow afternoon.
Jeremy Clements in the 0 car from Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Yeah, J.C. Stout had been driving this car. It was the only car that did not qualify at Dover last weekend, so Jeremy's in it here at Kansas this weekend.
Also one of the drivers that'll have to scratch and claw his way into the field, not with the luxury of being locked in. Top 30 are locked in the Nationwide Series. Another look at Joey Logano in the GameStop car.
Right now, Joey is 3rd quickest. He's run a total of 29 laps.
Joey's been pretty successful on the mile-and-a-half racetrack so far this year with a couple of wins, one at Chicago, and talked about the one at Kentucky earlier.
One Nationwide Series start here for Logano. Finished 9th 1 year ago from a 13th starting position.
Now, Larry, this is one of the teams now. They put a lot of laps, at least on a set of tires, if not 2 sets of tires. They've got 20 or 30 laps on the racetrack right now.
Yeah, that's about as many laps as anybody. John West Townley, he's run a total of 36 laps. So Joey's run about the 2nd most laps of anybody that's out there right now. So we've had 49 cars qualify with about 25 minutes to go, or to practice with 25 minutes to go in this practice session.
Logano got wins at Chicago, 1.5 miles, Kentucky,
1.5 miles.
1.5 miles. in Nashville, mile and a third.
Yep, a little under a mile and a half.
Backup car for Clint Bowyer headed to the racetrack. We'll cover that when we come back here on Speed. Clint Bowyer has his Holiday Inn Chevrolet, his backup car back up to full speed, but now he pulls down onto the apron. He'll head back to the garage. So he gets a couple laps in on that backup car.
And I think that was the biggest thing they wanted to accomplish in this practice. Let's just get some laps, see where we're at, sit down, regroup, and then we'll be ready to go for that final 1 hour practice.
Bob Dillner.
Oh, boys, he ain't happy. He says the car drives like junk. It's chattering the tires. It's vibrating all over the place. He's not a happy camper with this backup car here, and I'm sure they're going to come in, try to dial it back in because he's just not happy.
Well, Bob, I hate to tell him this. If you hadn't wrecked the good car, you went to drive the backup car.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that from your crew chief point of view. You shouldn't have wrecked the good one then.
Well, I mean, at least don't be too critical about it, because, again, those guys didn't wreck it. They'll fix it. They'll get it better. I mean, the first time on the racetrack, his time was good enough for 28 quickness. I know that's not what he wanted. He's more interested in how the car drives. But, hey, just work with us here a little bit, driver. Just work with us just a little bit.
Well, and as Bob said, 5 minutes into this practice, that car was third quickest, but backed her into the wall.
Yeah, just 3.5 tenths off what he ran with his other car. So it's like, I'm with you, Jeff. Give him a chance to get it right. They'll get it. I guarantee you, Doug Randolph and that group, give them a little chance to work with it. They'll get it where it needs to be. More than likely, here's what I'm thinking. He said it's chattering the front tires. If your driver crashes the primary car because it's loose, how are you going to send the backup car out there?
Tight.
Bingo. Now we can back up and free it up a little bit.
Exactly.
You don't have to work with me, just don't work against me.
There's a method to the crew chief madness.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do to kind of protect yourself.
In other words, Clint Bowyer's on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah, I'm not going to send him out there with the exact setup that he just crashed the primary car with. I don't think that's a great plan.
And let's add, that was our best race car, because he said it himself. That was a winning car from a week ago. So, you know, it's just a few things there, guys. I mean, you know, I'm sorry. Yes, you're correct, Steve. My crew chief mentality came out a little.
I knew it.
He drugged me right down the river with it.
I could see him shaking his head as the words came out of Bob Dillner's mouth. It's Kevin Conway driving the 26 car. Let's find out where he is on the timing and scoring monitor. He is just 43rd overall of the 49 drivers who have practiced.
But now this car is locked into the show, so he doesn't have to worry about cutting that fast lap, at least in these practice sessions.
Kevin working on his 19th lap. We are 1 hour and 12 minutes into this practice.
See Brian Scott, we talked about him earlier, right behind him in that 11 car. Right now, Brian, of course, who competes in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series full-time, is 18th quickest.
You're talking about silly season for the Nationwide Series team. I keep seeing his name floating around there, Brian Scott.
And I would say rightly so, because Brian has certainly shown a lot of talent in the Camping World Truck Series, won the race up at Dover earlier in the year. So I think there's a reason. Young, well-spoken young man. There's a reason you're hearing it.
And the thing is, right now, watch how he kind of set the 26 car up. He ran him down. He rolled out of it earlier, picked that throttle up, caught him going down the back straight, and made a really clean pass at number 11. Shows a lot of composure.
I just realized something about Jeff Hamilton. I'm guilty by association. I can see that now.
So was Walter.
Kyle Busch about to muscle past Shelby Howard, and he does so going into turn 1. Glad you're back with us here at the Kansas Speedway. Wendy Vetrini has an update on the Toyota tandem of Kyle Busch and Joey Logano.
Yeah, the Joe Gibbs Racing stable are on 2 different game plans. You noticed you guys made a comment about Joey Logano running so many laps in this practice session. Their plan was to get as many laps earlier in the practice session and call it quits. towards the end, which is exactly what they have done. Joey Logano has climbed out of the race car. He's headed back over to the Sprint Cup garage area to go talk to his crew and debrief with this Cup side before he qualifies for the Sprint Cup Series, which is about 30 minutes away. But Joey Logano feels good about his nationwide car. The changes have helped, and he's been a little bit tight today after they made those huge adjustments, but they feel very satisfied with the way the car was running here on the nationwide side. Now, right next door to him, Kyle Busch, who's out on that racetrack right now, has also put a lot of laps on his race car, not quite as much as his teammate Joey Logano, but Kyle has made minor adjustments to this race car throughout this practice session, making it to what Kyle Busch would want to make it to perfection for him for the race this weekend. And we know what's at stake with the Nationwide Points Championship. Kyle Busch wants to get another win here at Kansas and make it a good weekend for the Joe Gibbs Racing Camp. And that's all that's going on this end of the garage. Steve?
Well, Wendy, interesting note about those two. Kyle Busch has finished second to Joey Logano in all 3 of Logano's wins.
But I'm glad Wendy expanded on that, because when she said that he has quit practice early and went over to the Cup garage, I think that's a great move, because let's face it, Joey is only making his 2nd Sprint Cup Series start here. And I think going over there, sitting down, relaxing, talking to Greg Zipadelli is a good move to maybe put him more acclimated to now what he has to do to qualify that Sprint Cup Series cars versus the way these Nationwide Series cars drive.
Let's just remember, that's one of the reasons why he's not running a full-time season. They want him to concentrate more on that Sprint Cup side to get acclimated. So I think it's probably, yes, a great move on their part. Get him back over here. Take a look right there. Clint Bowyer going back out again with the 29 car. And one other note, guys, just watching the clouds, and we talk about we're not expecting any rain, but it's gotten pretty overcast, and it definitely no sun on the racetrack, so the racetrack has probably cooled down quite a bit more yet, and probably gives these guys a little bit more grip here late in this practice session. You see all the Sprint Cup cars lined up for qualifying here, getting ready to follow us.
Well, I know the temperature may be changing, but best I can tell, I'm sure Wendy and Bob probably will support this. Looking at the flags, I'm not sure that wind has calmed down a whole lot.
Bob Dillner.
No, that wind has not calmed down. In fact, when Clint Bowyer rolled out to the racetrack right now, they basically said, hey, Kevin Harvick just really complained about the wind. Be careful out there. And guys, I only caught half of the conversation before. He was chattering the right front going into the corner, but he was loose as anything through the rest of the corner. Clint Bowyer, and I was paraphrasing as you guys alluded to some of his comments before, he basically told the team, I am not going to run the car like this, so you better fix it. Well, they went to work, they changed springs, they changed shocks, they changed a bunch of stuff on this race car, so you can see it wiggle right there again. I don't know if Clint Bowyer's a happy camper in this car yet.
He's headed back to you, Bob.
Got his hands full right there. You could see it as he was going down into turn 3, and I just don't think we can stress, even though that doesn't look like much, but the speeds that you're running here when that happens. That's Doug Randolph, the crew chief, looking a little perplexed just right now, trying to figure out which way to go next.
What is it that Dale Earnhardt used to tell you when he came to pit road?
I want 4, and I ain't leaving till you give them to me.
Back to Kansas Speedway after this. About 10 minutes remaining in this NASCAR Nationwide Series practice at the Kansas Speedway. Kyle Busch has completed 22 laps of practice, and he is the fastest at a 32.06. That's 168.40 miles per hour.
Brad Keselowski back out on the racetrack. He's now run a total of 20 laps. That last lap was a 32.65. His fast lap was on lap 12 at a 32.25. Right now, Kyle Busch is actually the only driver to run over 168 miles per hour average at 168.4.
Martin Truex Jr. set the track record here back in October of 2005. 178.938 miles per hour, so that record not in jeopardy here this weekend.
Well, the other thing we keep talking about, we watched the 88 right there, looked like he was wiggling down in the middle of the corner, about this racetrack, and even though the wind conditions and everything, how much slower the speeds are from a year ago whenever Kevin Harvick wound up sitting on the pole at a 31.35, and right now, guys, you know, we're at basically a 32 flat.
Well, we know they're going to pick up qualifying, but I don't think they'll get anywhere near what that track record is.
Oh, I know that'll never be in jeopardy, but I would be surprised if they even get down to what Kevin qualified at a year ago.
Justin Allgaier just jumped up the third quickest in that Dodge. He's run 25 laps. He just ran a 32:29. Bob, what you got down there, buddy?
Well, how about this for the final report of this practice session for Clint Bowyer? You can see the wreck car on the right and the backup car, which Clint Bowyer will use tomorrow here at Kansas, on the left. Well, what they did is they were so bad they decided to say, hey, forget about it. Just park the car for this practice session. We're going to swap some things out from one car to another. They even have the engine lift out, and I don't know if they can do that in this break here, but they're thinking about changing the engine on this thing too. But Clint Bowyer is done. They are definitely going to go to work, and they have one more practice session to try to get this car dialed in for Clint Bowyer, because as I said, he's not liking that car too much in this run.
Yeah, Bob, per the NASCAR rule book, they can change the engine in this car because simply they've had to go to a backup car. The rule is you have to basically present the car for inspection for qualifying tomorrow with the engine you intend on racing, which is obvious when you have an impound procedure like Nationwide Series.
Want to let you know that America's fastest game show is Pastime, and every Wednesday night you can play along. Just name the time and see if you're better than the contestants or the house. Catch back-to-back episodes of Pastime Wednesday nights beginning at 9 Eastern, and it's presented in lovely, stunning Speed HD. Now 5 minutes left in this Nationwide Series practice here at the Kansas Speedway. A lot of laps on the board from Kyle Busch, now working his 32nd lap of practice, and he is the quickest. He's followed by Brad Keselowski, Justin Allgaier, Joey Logano, Kevin Harvick, and then Greg Biffle.
Now, the only car that has not practiced is the 47 car of Chase Miller. We have 51 cars here, 50 cars practice, and right now the fastest of the go-or-go-homers, kind of backing up that qualifying effort at Dover last week. John West Townley, the 09 car, has jumped up to 12th quickest.
The 91 car, driven by Terry Cook.
He's second quickest of the go-or-go-homers. He's 16th quickest.
Terry's done an outstanding job with that 91 car all year long when it comes to qualifying and getting it in the show. It just seems like every time you turn around, he's able to find a fast lap out of it.
You know, Phil Parsons told me well back at the beginning of the year that he really feels like if he could put some sponsorship on this car with Terry Cook, that he could be very competitive. Terry really gives great feedback on the race car, does a good job in practice getting the car qualified, just needs a sponsorship on the side of it.
And Terry does have a win here in the Camping World Truck Series too, back in 2006.
Carl Edwards, that breast cancer awareness Think Pink car, on board with Carl. He is 9th overall. Carl working his 13th lap.
So we've got a couple of those Roush Fenway Fords up in the top 10. His teammate Greg Biffle in the 16 car is 6th right now. Carl has not run a lot of laps. Right now he's only run 11 total. His fastest lap was on lap 3. Wendy.
Well, Larry, like we said, Carl Edwards had sat out most of this practice session. He had just gotten back into his race car and made one lap a minute ago, and he had a bad tire rub. He said there was a lot of tire smoke he was smelling in the race car. They came into the garage area. He figured out it was the outside on the right rear tire for Carl Edwards that was giving him a little bit of rub. So they made some minor adjustments. He was a little bit tight in the middle of 1 and 2. So on top of fixing the tire rub and fixing the tight condition, Carl Edwards should pick up a little bit of time here. We'll see. But he has not run too many laps this practice session, taking it easy in the Nationwide Garage.
All right, thank you, Wendy.
Steve Brian Scott in that 11 car, that Toyota just jumped up there to 2nd quickest with a time of 32:20.
Yeah, but Steve, look at the guy, the young man, that just jumped up to 7th quickest in the 22 car.
Parker Kligerman.
I mean to tell you right now, he is getting it done.
Yeah, both the Penske cars are up there in the top 7. Justin Allgaier is 4th in the 12 car.
Tell you what, they've got quite a stable of young drivers over there at Penske right now. Justin Allgaier, Parker Kligerman. They've got quite a stable.
Well, I mean, when you think about the fact that we were able to get Brad Keselowski to come over there, I mean, that's another addition. I mean, it looks like they're really planning for the future.
Kligerman told me that his first ARCA race at Pocono back in June, that Kurt Busch took him around the track in a rental car and, you know, showed him a lot just going around in a rental car.
Brendan Gaughan in the 62 cars. We're under about 2 minutes left in his practice session. He's run a total of 20 laps, but right now only 31 quickest, 31st quickest. Mike Wallace in the 01 car. You know, we're going to have something really, really neat happen in a few weeks at Talladega in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series. You know, there's been a lot of races where we've had fathers and sons race each other. You know, Richard raced against Kyle. Dale Earnhardt raced against Dale Earnhardt Jr. But in that NASCAR Camping World Truck Series race next month, Mike Wallace is going to race against his daughter, Chrissy Wallace, who has a ride for that Truck Series race. And I don't know, we can get our historian to look it up. I don't know if we've ever had a father-daughter race against each other in any of the top NASCAR series. So that's going to be a pretty neat deal.
That's going to be rough for Mike Wallace.
I was getting ready to say the same thing.
And you said Talladega?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Closing seconds of this practice, you see Kyle Busch is the quickest, no surprise there. Don't forget trackside at 7. Jimmy Johnson and Mark Martin will join us here on Speed at 7. Thanks for being with us here on Speed.